and comfortable floral patterned chairs when my mobile chimed. It was my only daughter, Sophie. Her voice was unusually flat, almost icy, as she announced, "Mom, we're off to Bali tomorrow. I've already sold your cottage in Cornwall and your little Minnie. We needed the funds. Cheerio." And she disconnected. 40 years of raising her, countless sacrifices, and she dismissed me like an old jumper. But I drew a slow breath, a faint smile touching my lips. There was something my dear Sophie didn't know. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 71 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew my daughter. I'd been a widow for 6 months. My husband, Arthur, had passed away from a sudden heart attack over breakfast, just as we had every morning for 4 decades. That day, he'd poured my Earl Grey with milk and buttered my crumpet. His last words, a gentle kiss on my forehead, were, "Good morning, my love." Since then, Sophie had been a more constant presence, or so I believed. She visited 3 times a week, helped with the funeral arrangements, and accompanied me to Sainsbury's. She even insisted I see a GP for a general checkup. "Mom, you must look after yourself now that you're alone," she'd say, with that smile I mistook for affection, but now understood was pure opportunism. The Cornwall cottage had been our haven for years. Arthur and I bought it when Sophie was 15 through sheer hard work and careful saving. Every summer we'd go there, creating memories, celebrating birthdays and Christmases. Sophie would bring her boyfriends and later her husband, Mark. I'd cook for everyone, clean, and do the laundry. It was our treasured family ritual. I never imagined she'd see it as merely an asset to be liquidated. And the car, that trusty old Mini Cooper, Arthur had cherished it like a child. He'd wash it every Sunday, check the oil religiously, and always park it under the ancient oak in the driveway. Sophie knew what that Mini meant to me. It was the last tangible piece of him. His faint cologne still lingered on the upholstery. When she hung up, I remained in that drab waiting room, surrounded by other ailing souls. And for the first time in months, I didn't weep. A strange calm settled within me, a peace I hadn't felt since Arthur's passing. Because in that instant, I remembered something I'd completely forgotten. 3 days before he died, Arthur had handed me a thick manila envelope. "Eleanor, pop this in your bedside table drawer. If anything happens to me, open it after a while, but only when you feel truly ready." I'd tucked it away without much thought. After the funeral, amidst the haze of grief and endless paperwork, I'd simply forgotten. But there it was, waiting for me at home. The nurse called my name. Dr. Davies examined me, declared me in excellent health for my age, merely needing more rest and better nutrition. I nodded and smiled, my mind far away. I was thinking of that envelope, of the chill in Sophie's voice, and how Mark was almost certainly behind it all. He had never warmed to me, always viewing me as an inconvenience. I left the surgery and walked leisurely to the bus stop. I no longer had a car, according to Sophie. But as I waited, I couldn't help but grin. There was something almost poetic in all this. My daughter believed she'd left me with nothing. But what she didn't know was that Arthur, my brilliant Arthur, had always been a man who planned ahead. The double-decker arrived, and I took a window seat, watching London blur past, the terraced houses, bustling shops, people rushing, each with their own dramas, their own hidden narratives. I had my own now, and I was about to unravel them. Back home, I went straight to my bedroom. I opened the bedside table drawer, and there it was, the manila envelope, precisely where I'd left it. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. I could feel several documents inside. Arthur had written my name on the front in his elegant script. I sat on the edge of the bed we had shared for so many years and took a deep breath. Dusk was settling, filling the house with familiar shadows that no longer held any dread. I opened the envelope slowly, as if unwrapping a precious gift. What I discovered inside would change everything. What I found in that envelope utterly stole my breath. There were legal documents, property deeds, bank certificates, and a handwritten letter from Arthur. My eyes welled with tears as I read his familiar penmanship. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive me for not revealing everything while I was alive, but I wanted to shield you from worries. Over the years, I invested our savings in various properties and businesses. We don't just have the Cornwall cottage. We own 6 other properties, including the block of flats where Sophie and Mark reside. We also hold shares in 3 thriving companies worth more than you can imagine. You are wealthy, my love. You always were. But now it's official, on paper too. My hands shook as I sifted through the documents. There were deeds to houses in different London boroughs, a flat in Mayfair, a charming guest house on the Dorset coast, and indeed, the 20-story apartment building where my daughter lived. Arthur had been the silent owner for the past 10 years, having placed everything under the umbrella of a holding company I knew nothing about. According to the papers, I was the sole heir to that company. There were also bank statements for accounts I never knew existed with figures that seemed unreal. Arthur had been a bus driver for 40 years, but evidently he had also been an exceptionally shrewd investor. Every penny we'd saved, every sacrifice we had made, he had quietly multiplied, and I had been completely oblivious. In the letter, Arthur explained he had kept it a secret because he didn't want me to fret about money, nor for Sophie to know our true financial standing. You know our daughter, Eleanor. If she knew we had so much, her attitude would undoubtedly change. I want her to love us for who we are, not what we possess. What irony! Our daughter had left believing we had nothing, when in reality, we had everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I roamed the house, touching the old furniture and the trinkets Sophie had always dismissed as dated. I gazed at the family photos on the wall, particularly one of her at 5 years old, giggling on Arthur's lap. Where had that sweet little girl gone? When had she become so cold, so calculating? The next morning, early, the phone rang. It was Sophie again. Her voice sounded different, softer, but I'd already learned to be wary of those shifts in tone. "Mom, how are you? I wanted to let you know we've transferred the money from the cottage and the mini. We've deposited your share into your account. It's not much, but it'll help you get by for a few months while you look for something smaller." "My share?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "Yes, Mom. We obviously weren't going to leave you with nothing. We gave you 30%. That's fair, isn't it? We need the rest for our investment in Bali. Mark has an incredible business opportunity over there." Mr. Henderson called me one Wednesday morning. "Mrs. Vance, I have good news. I was able to nullify the sale of the Cornwall cottage. The buyers weren't aware the sale was fraudulent, so they received their money back without any issue. The cottage is yours again." "Excellent, Mr. Henderson. And the building where Sophie lives?" "That one is more complicated. Technically, you've always been the owner through the company, but we need to make some administrative changes so you have direct control. That should take another 2 weeks." "Perfect. Keep me informed." After hanging up, I sat in the kitchen with my coffee and thought about Sophie. She had been in Bali for 3 weeks, and I hadn't heard a peep from her. Not a call, not a message, not even a postcard. To her, I had ceased to exist the moment she got the money she needed, but I knew that was going to change soon. I decided to visit the Cornwall cottage. I took the train to the coast, the same route Arthur and I had taken hundreds of times. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Small, cream-colored, with a porch overlooking the sea. The recent occupants had placed some potted plants on the steps, but otherwise, everything was the same. I sat on the curb across the street and simply gazed at it for an hour. I recalled summer afternoons when Sophie was little, running on the beach and building sandcastles, Arthur grilling fresh fish on the barbecue while I prepared salads in the kitchen, Sophie bringing friends, then boyfriends, then Mark. All those joyous moments she had reduced to a simple commercial transaction. An older gentleman emerged from the house and noticed me sitting there. He approached me with a curious frown. "Are you all right, madam?" "Yes, thank you. Just reminiscing. I knew the former owners." "Ah, yes, I knew them very well. What a dreadful business. They told us the elderly lady was very poorly and needed to sell quickly, so we thought it was a bargain. But it turns out the sale wasn't legal. We had to give the house back." "Did you know them personally?" "No, we did everything through intermediaries, but they told us the daughter was handling everything because the mother couldn't." If you only knew how dreadful it really was, I thought. "Well, I'm glad you didn't lose your money." "Yes, fortunately, everything worked out well, though now we have to look for another house. We were quite fond of this one." I left there with a heavy heart. It wasn't just the money that hurt. It was the ease with which Sophie had lied about me. She had fabricated a story about my illness. She had used my supposed vulnerability to justify her actions. To her, I wasn't a person with feelings, but an obstacle to be removed. That night, I called Mr. Henderson again. "Mr. Henderson, I need you to help me with something else. I want to get Arthur's Mini back too." "That will be more difficult, Mrs. Vance. The car was in your name, but your daughter held a power of attorney that allowed her to sell it." "How was that possible?" "Apparently, you signed that power of attorney a few months ago after your husband's death. Don't you recall?" There it was, the moment Sophie had begun planning all of this. I vaguely remember signing some papers she had brought to me, telling me they were to facilitate the funeral and inheritance arrangements. I had been so clouded by grief that I signed without reading. How naive I had been. "I understand, Mr. Henderson. Is there any way to get it back?" "We can try, but it will be more complicated. We would need to prove you signed that power of attorney under deception or coercion." "Let's do it. I want to reclaim everything they took from me." Over the next few weeks, I developed a strange routine. In the mornings, I was the poor widow everyone knew. I would go out to buy essentials, chat with the neighbors, and keep up appearances. But in the afternoons, I became a businesswoman. I would study Arthur's documents, consult with Mr. Henderson, and plan my next move. I learned things about finance I never thought I would need to know. I discovered that Arthur had been far more ingenious than I realized. The block of flats where Sophie lived wasn't just profitable from rent. It was in an area that was rapidly appreciating. I also discovered that Mark, Sophie's husband, was riddled with debt. He had taken out loans using their flat as collateral, unaware he wasn't the true owner. When the banks figured this out, he was going to be in serious trouble. Mr. Henderson called me on Friday with important news. "Mrs. Vance, we've completed all the paperwork. You now have total control of all your properties. I also managed to retrieve Arthur's Mini. The buyer turned out to be an acquaintance of mine, and when I explained the situation, he agreed to return it in exchange for a small compensation." "Excellent work, Mr. Henderson. And I need you to help me with one more thing. I want you to send a letter to my daughter." "What kind of letter?" "An eviction notice." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Vance, are you certain you want to do this?" "Completely sure. She decided I wasn't important in her life. Now she's going to discover how important I really am." I understand. Do you want me to send it to Bali? No, I want you to give it to her when she gets back. I have a feeling it's going to be very soon. I wasn't wrong. That same afternoon, Brenda came rushing to my house with the latest neighborhood gossip. Eleanor, did you know Mark is in hot water with the bank? My brother-in-law, who works there, told me they're investigating some loans he took out using their flat as collateral, but it turns out the flat isn't his. Really? Yes, and it seems Sophie didn't know anything. They're saying she's going to have to come back from Bali to sort out this mess. What a complicated situation. Yes, and the worst part is, apparently Mark lied to her about the business in Bali. There was no business. He just wanted to escape the debts he had here. Perfect. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. Sophie had trusted Mark, sacrificed her relationship with me for him, and now she was discovering he wasn't the man she thought he was. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and gazed at the stars. Arthur used to say that the stars were the souls of people who had lived a full life, watching
30% of my own property. How generous. I see, darling. And when are you off? This afternoon. Our bags are already packed. We'll be gone for at least 6 months, maybe longer if the business takes off. But don't fret, Mum. When we get back, we'll help you find a small flat, something that suits your needs. Suits my needs. As if she knew what my needs were. Right, Sophie. Have a safe journey. Oh, Mum, I knew you'd understand. You've always been so compassionate. We love you so much. And she hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, and for the first time in months, I laughed. A deep, unrestrained laugh like I hadn't since Arthur died. The situation was utterly preposterous, comical even. My daughter had plundered my assets, effectively evicted me from my own home, spoken to me with unbearable condescension, all to fund a Balinese adventure that would likely end in tears. But what stung most wasn't the money. It was the effortless way she had cast me aside. 40 years of my life devoted to her, of sacrifice, of unconditional love, and she had erased me from her life with a 2-minute phone call. That was the true wound. I checked my bank account online. Sure enough, an amount had been deposited, which they probably considered substantial, but to me, it was a pittance. They had sold the Cornwall cottage for far less than its market value, likely because they needed quick cash, and Arthur's Mini for a mere song. That afternoon, from my window, I watched Sophie and Mark load their suitcases into a black cab. He hauled 2 enormous cases. She had a very expensive-looking carry-on. I watched them laugh, kiss, and plan their future. They looked like 2 giddy teenagers embarking on an escapade. They never glanced towards my window, never offered a farewell wave. When the cab pulled away, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, Arthur's documents spread across the table. I had decisions to make. I could call a solicitor, reclaim my properties and demand back everything they had taken, but something told me there was a better way to handle this, a more educational way. I called Mr. Henderson, the solicitor who had handled Arthur's affairs. He'd been at the funeral, offered his condolences, and told me to call if I ever needed anything. Well, now I needed him. Mrs. Vance, good to hear from you. How are you? I'm well, Mr. Henderson. I need to see you urgently. I've found some documents of Arthur's that I don't quite understand. Of course. You can come to my office tomorrow morning. I'll make time. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. I dreamt of Arthur. He was sitting in his favourite armchair, reading the Times, just like every morning. And when he saw me, he smiled and said, "It's about time, my love. It's about time you stood up for yourself."
I woke with a strange sensation. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it wasn't the familiar sadness either. It was something akin to determination. For the first time since Arthur's death, I had a clear purpose. I was going to reclaim what was mine, but not in the way Sophie expected. The next morning, I dressed with more care than usual. I chose my wine-coloured dress, the one Arthur always said made me look elegant. I styled my hair and applied a touch of makeup, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw a strong woman. Mr. Henderson's office was in the city, an old but distinguished building with marble floors and grand windows. He greeted me with a warm smile, but when I presented the documents, his expression shifted entirely. "Mrs. Vance, this is far more than I imagined. Arthur was a very astute man. Look, according to these papers, you are the owner of—" "I know, Mr. Henderson. I've already reviewed them. What I need to know is what I can do legally." Mr. Henderson explained that everything was in order, the documents legitimate, and I was the rightful owner of all those properties. He also confirmed something I had already suspected. The sale of the Cornwall cottage was illegal because Sophie had no right to sell it. "We can reclaim the cottage immediately, Mrs. Vance, and we can also initiate legal action against your daughter for fraud." "No, Mr. Henderson, I don't wish to pursue legal action. I want to handle this differently. I want everything to remain a secret for now. Can you help me?" He looked at me with curiosity but nodded. "Of course. You are my client. What do you require?" "I need you to discreetly retrieve the Cornwall cottage, do what is necessary to nullify that fraudulent sale, and I need you to help me gain direct control of all my properties, especially the building where my daughter lives." "I understand. It will be a process that takes a few weeks, but it's entirely feasible." "Perfect. And Mr. Henderson, I need no one to know I am behind all of this, at least for now." When I left his office, I felt as though I had awakened from a very long dream. I walked through the busy London streets, observing the people, the architecture, the life unfolding as normal. But for me, everything had changed. I had a plan. The following weeks were the strangest of my life. Officially, I was a poor widow abandoned by my daughter, that in secret, I was a wealthy woman silently orchestrating the recovery of my assets. Mr. Henderson worked efficiently, calling me every few days with updates on the legal proceedings. I decided to remain in my house for the time being. It was mine after all, though Sophie probably expected me to move into a single room. Every morning, I would wake, have breakfast at the same table where Arthur and I had shared so many years, and then go for a walk in the neighbourhood. The neighbours would greet me with that mixture of pity and curiosity reserved for recent widows. Brenda, my lifelong next-door neighbour, approached me one afternoon when I was watering the front garden. "Eleanor, dear, is it true Sophie went to Bali and left you all alone?" "Yes, Brenda. She went with Mark. They have business plans over there." "And how will you manage, sweetie? We all know Arthur didn't leave much money." If you only knew, I thought. "Don't worry, Brenda. I'll be perfectly fine. Do you need anything? I can bring you some food, help you with groceries." "You're very kind, but I'm fine, really." Brenda looked at me with that expression I knew well. It was the same look I'd received after the funeral. Compassion, laced with a hint of relief that it wasn't their tragedy. "Well, you know where to find me if you need anything." These conversations were constant, repeated with the butcher, the baker, the lady at the corner shop. Everyone spoke to me in that soft tone they reserve for the unfortunate, and I would nod, smile, and thank them for their concern. But inside, a part of me relished this performance. It was like living a double life.
over their families from the heavens. If that were true, then he was up there, observing his plan unfold perfectly. "Thank you, my love," I whispered to the sky. "Thank you for looking after me, even after your passing." The next day, Mr. Henderson called me early. "Mrs. Vance, I have some news. Your daughter just arrived back in the country. She's at Heathrow, alone." "Alone?" "Yes. Apparently, Mark stayed in Bali. There are rumors they had a very big argument." "I see. Did you send the letter?" "I'm going to send it today. She should receive it tomorrow." I hung up the phone and stood there in the kitchen, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. After so many weeks of silent planning, the moment for the first real move had finally arrived. Sophie was about to discover that her mother was not the defenseless victim she believed. Sophie arrived at her flat on Tuesday night. I knew this because Brenda, who seemed to have informants throughout the neighborhood, came to tell me the next day. "Eleanor, your daughter returned last night. I saw her go in with one suitcase, but she looked dreadful, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, as if she'd been weeping the whole flight. Alone, completely alone. And something odd, Eleanor. When the doorman asked her for the keys, she didn't have them. She had to ask the building manager to let her in with the emergency copy." Interesting. Mark had the keys, which meant he had probably decided not to return. Or perhaps Sophie had discovered something about him and had fled. In any case, my daughter was back, and very soon she would receive my little welcome gift. Mr. Henderson called me that same afternoon. "Mrs. Vance, the letter was delivered an hour ago. The doorman confirmed your daughter received it in person." "Perfect. How long did we give her?" 30 days to vacate the flat as per legal standards. "But, Mrs. Vance, are you sure you want to do this? She is your daughter, after all." "Mr. Henderson, my daughter kicked me out of my own house with a 2-minute phone call. She sold my belongings without asking. She treated me like rubbish. Now she's going to learn that actions have consequences. I understand. I just wanted to ensure you had considered all the implications. I have considered them, Mr. Henderson, all of them." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake imagining Sophie's face when she read the letter. The initial confusion, then disbelief, then panic. She would probably think it was a mistake, that someone was trying to scam her. But when she called to verify, she would discover that everything was completely legal. The next day, as if she had been waiting for my call, the phone rang at 8 in the morning. It was Sophie, and her voice sounded desperate. Mom, I need to talk to you urgently." "Good morning, darling. How was Bali?" "Mom, I don't have time for that right now. I received a very strange letter yesterday. It says I have to vacate my flat in 30 days. It must be a mistake, right? Do you know anything about this?" "An eviction notice? How strange. From whom?" "From a company I've never heard of. It's called... Wait, let me find the letter. Vance Investments, Inc. Do you know this company?" Arthur had used his own name for the company. How poetic. "No, darling, I've never heard that name. Are you sure the letter is legitimate?" "That's what I want to find out. Mom, I need you to help me. I don't know what to do. Mark left me in Bali. He ran off with another woman, and now I come back to this. I don't understand what's happening." There was the confirmation. Mark had abandoned her, probably when the money ran out, or when he realized that the legal problems at home were more serious than he thought.
Poor Sophie. She had sacrificed her family for a worthless man. "I'm so sorry, darling. Where are you now?" "I'm in the flat, but I don't know for how long. Mom, can I come see you? I need to talk to someone. I don't have anyone else." The irony was perfect. Now that she was left without the man for whom she had abandoned me, she remembered she had a mother. "Of course, darling. Come over whenever you want. I'm on my way." I hung up the phone and stood there in the kitchen. I had to be perfect for this performance. I put on my most conservative gray dress, tied my hair in a simple bun, and practiced my expression of a worried but resigned mother. When Sophie arrived, she would see exactly what she expected to see: a poor, vulnerable widow who had been abandoned by her own daughter. Sophie arrived an hour later. When I opened the door, I was surprised at how dreadful she looked. She had lost weight, had deep circles under her eyes, and her expensive clothes looked wrinkled and unkempt. Her eyes were red for crying. "Mom," she said, and for a moment I thought she was going to hug me, but she stopped as if she suddenly remembered how things had ended between us. "Come in, darling. Do you want some tea?" "Yes, please." We sat in the kitchen, at the same table where I had read Arthur's documents weeks ago. Sophie looked small in that chair, lost, just like when she was a child and came to tell me about her school problems. "Mom, I'm so sorry for the way I left. I know I didn't treat you well." "It's in the past, darling." "No, it's not. I treated you badly. I said horrible things, and now I have no one." "What happened with Mark?" "He left with a 25-year-old hotel waitress in Paris. It turns out there was never any business in Bali. It was all a lie. He just wanted to escape the debts he had here and use the money from the sale of your cottage to fund his adventure." "All the debts?" "Yes, Mom, so many debts. It seems he had been taking out loans for years, using the flat we lived in as collateral. But now I find out he wasn't the owner of the flat. How is that possible?"
Here was my opportunity. "I don't know, darling. Property matters are very complicated. The problem is that now the banks are coming after me for his debts. They say since we were married, I'm also responsible. On top of that, this eviction notice. Mom, I don't know what to do. I don't have money. I don't have a job. I don't have anywhere to live." She started to cry, real tears of genuine desperation. And for a moment, my mother's heart softened. I wanted to hug her, console her, tell her everything would be okay. But then I remembered the coldness in her voice when she called me from the doctor's office, the ease with which she had discarded me, the way she had talked to me as if I were a burden. "Did you talk to a solicitor about the letter?" "I don't have money for a solicitor, Mom. We spent all the money in Bali. Mark took what little was left when he ran off with that woman." "So, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. I thought maybe I could stay with you for a while, just until I find a job and can get a small place to live." There was the question I had been waiting for. After kicking me out of my own house, after selling my belongings, after treating me like rubbish, she now wanted me to rescue her. She wanted the poor widow she had created to save her from the consequences of her own actions. "Of course, darling, this will always be your home." Sophie looked at me with surprise, as if she hadn't expected it to be so easy. "Really, Mom? After everything that happened?" "You are my daughter, Sophie. That will never change." She got up, and this time she hugged me. It was a desperate hug, from someone drowning and clinging to the only thing they can find. I hugged her back, too, but not with the unconditional love from before. Now there was calculation in my embrace. Strategy. Thank you, Mom. I promise I'll find a job soon. I won't be a burden. Don't worry about that now. Rest, recover, and then we'll see what your options are. Sophie left that afternoon to get some things from her flat. I stayed in the kitchen thinking about how easy it had been. She had come to me exactly as I had planned. Broken, desperate, with no options, and best of all, she suspected nothing. To her, I was still the poor, abandoned mother who needed her compassion. But this was only the first part of my plan. Having her live with me would give me the perfect opportunity for the next phase. I was going to let her settle in, feel safe, and believe she had found a refuge in my house. And then, when she least expected it, I was going to teach her the difference between being poor by choice and being poor by consequence. That night, I called Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, I need you to do something else for me. Tell me, Mrs. Vance. I want you to investigate Mark's debts. I want to know exactly how much he owes, to whom, and what legal options I have to separate them from my daughter. That will take time, but it's feasible. Perfect. And Mr. Henderson, I want you to keep this an absolute secret. No one can know I am behind this investigation. Of course, Mrs. Vance. May I ask what your final plan is? My plan, Mr. Henderson, is very simple. I'm going to save my daughter, but first she has to understand what it truly means to hit rock bottom. When I hung up, I poured myself a glass of the sherry Arthur had been saving for special occasions. It had been a long time since I'd had a special occasion like this one. The game had begun, and for the first time in months, I had all the good cards in my hand. Sophie moved into my house the next day. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, all that was left of her previous life. I watched her unpack in her old room, the same one she had slept in during her teenage years, and I could see the humiliation in every one of her movements. She had gone from living in a luxury flat to taking refuge in her childhood bedroom. "Mom, I found this in the flat," she said, showing me a manila envelope. "It was among Mark's things. It has your name on it." It was another one of Arthur's envelopes. My heart speeded up, but I kept my composure. "My name? How strange." "Yes, look," she showed me. The envelope indeed had my name written on it in Arthur's handwriting, but this envelope was different from the one I had found in my dresser. This one was smaller, newer. Maybe Mark found it among Dad's things when he died and forgot to give it to me? That's possible. Can I see it? I opened the envelope in her presence. Inside was a short letter and a small key. The letter said, "Eleanor, if you are reading this after having received the main envelope, it means our daughter is going through a difficult time. This key opens a safety deposit box at the Central Bank, London branch. The number is 247. There is something there that can help you help her, but use it wisely. With eternal love, Arthur." Sophie read the letter over my shoulder.
A safety deposit box? Dad had a safety deposit box? I had no idea. I didn't either, I lied. My father never told me about this. Do you think we should go see what's in there? I don't know, darling. Maybe it's better to leave things as they are. But Mom, maybe there's something important in there. Documents or, I don't know, maybe something valuable that can help us? The desperation in her voice was palpable. Sophie was clinging to any possibility of finding a way out of her situation, and I was going to let her cling a little longer before I showed her the complete reality. Okay, I said after a calculated pause. We can go tomorrow. That night, Sophie and I had dinner together for the first time in months. She had cooked, trying to be useful, but the food tasted of guilt and desperation. She told me more details about what had happened in Bali, and each story was worse than the last. Mark lied about everything, Mom, not just the business, but the debts too. I thought he only owed a little bit of money, but it turns out he owes over 100,000 pounds. And the worst part is he used my name for some of the loans without me knowing. How is that possible? He forged my signature. When I married him, I gave him some documents to handle the banking for our joint account. I never thought he'd use them for this. Do you have any way to prove you didn't know? I don't know. It's all so complicated. The banks say that since we were married, I'm also responsible. And the divorce? I don't even know where Mark is now. He just disappeared. His phone is disconnected. He doesn't answer emails. Nothing. It's as if he vanished. Perfect. Mark had run away like the rat he had always been, leaving Sophie to face the consequences of her actions alone. In a way, he had done me a favor. Now, my daughter
was experiencing exactly what I had felt when he abandoned me. Betrayal by someone she had completely trusted. I'm so sorry, darling. I didn't know things were so bad. I didn't either, Mum. I thought Mark loved me, that we were going to build something together. But it turns out I was just an easy way for him to get money and documents. Sophie started to cry again. How could I have been so stupid? How did I not realize who he really was? It was tempting to tell her that I had seen the signs from the beginning, that I had tried to warn her that Mark never seemed trustworthy, but that would have broken my facade as a compassionate and vulnerable mother. Love can be blinding sometimes, darling. Don't blame yourself. But Mum, I didn't just ruin my life, I ruined yours too. I treated you horribly. I took your cottage, your mini, your belongings, and all to give to a man who abandoned me at the first opportunity. Now we're two poor women trying to survive because of me. It's in the past, Sophie. We'll be okay. No, it's not. Now we're both in trouble because of my mistakes. You lost everything Dad left you, and I lost my marriage and my future. We're two poor women trying to survive. If she only knew, I thought, that at this very moment I had more money than she could possibly imagine, that I was the owner of the building where she lived, that I could solve all her problems with a single phone call. But it wasn't time yet. The next day we went to the bank. Sophie was nervous, hopeful. I maintained my act as a confused widow who didn't understand much about finance. The bank employee led us to the safety deposit boxes, verified my ID, and opened box number 247. Inside were jewels, many jewels, rings, necklaces, bracelets, earrings. I recognized some pieces as heirlooms from Arthur's family. Others were completely new to me. There was also a letter explaining the origin of each piece and its approximate value. Sophie gasped. Mom, this must be worth a fortune. You think so? Yes! Look at this emerald and this pearl necklace. Mom, Dad saved a treasure here.
According to Arthur's letter, the jewels were worth approximately £200,000. It was a significant amount, but it was nothing compared to the rest of my assets. It was like finding a few coins under the sofa when you have £1 million in the bank. What do we do with this, Mom? I don't know, darling. They're family memories. But Mom, we could sell some of the pieces. With this money, you could get your Cornwall cottage back, and I could pay off some of Mark's debts. There it was again. Even when she found something valuable, Sophie's first reaction was to think about how to use it to solve the problems Mark had created. She hadn't learned a thing. Are you sure you want to use your father's inheritance to pay Mark's debts? What other option do I have, Mom? If I don't pay something soon, they'll seize everything. Even this house could be at risk if they prove I have some kind of legal connection to the properties. How ironic the situation was. Sophie was worried about losing a house that I owned, paying the debts of a man who had abandoned her, with money from jewels that had belonged to the same man who had created the fortune that could save her. And how are you going to decide which debts to pay first? I talked to a free financial advisor at the bank. She told me to prioritize the debts that have real collateral because those are the ones that can affect property or lead to immediate foreclosure. Sophie had matured so much in these few weeks. The woman who had sold my belongings without consulting me was now carefully investigating every financial decision. The suffering had made her more responsible, but also more fragile. That night, while she was organizing the debt documents on the table, I received a call from Mr. Henderson. Mrs. Vance, I have a full report on Mark's debts. The situation is worse than I thought. How much worse? He owes over £200,000 to several banks and also has debts with private lenders. What's more concerning is that he used falsified documents with your daughter's signature for some of these loans. That means Sophie is legally responsible. It's complicated. If we can prove she didn't know, we might be able to get her out of some of the debts, but it's going to be a long and expensive process. How expensive? For a good solicitor specializing in these types of cases, probably £50,000, and there's no guarantee of success. I understand. And what if she just pays the debts? If she has the money, that would be the fastest solution, but I doubt she has access to that amount. Mr. Henderson, I want you to prepare all the necessary documents to get my daughter out of these debts, but don't tell her anything yet. You're going to pay, Mrs. Vance? I'm going to do whatever is necessary to protect my daughter, but this has to be handled in a very specific way. When I hung up, I found Sophie in the living room looking at the jewels with a sad expression. She looked lost, like a child who had broken her favorite toy and didn't know how to fix it. What are you thinking about, darling? About Dad? About how disappointed he would be in me if he could see what I did with my life? Your father loved you very much, Sophie. He would understand. No, Mom. He taught me to be responsible, to value family, not to be selfish, and I did the exact opposite. I abandoned my mother for a man who turned out to be a liar. I sold my cottage, my Minnie, my belongings, and all to give to a man who abandoned me at the first opportunity. Now we're two poor women trying to survive because of me.
Family's memories for money. I ruined everything he built. For the first time since she had returned, I heard genuine regret in her voice. It wasn't just lamenting the consequences of her actions, but a true acknowledgement that she had done something morally wrong. People make mistakes, darling. The important thing is to learn from them. But how do I learn from this, Mom? How do I fix the damage I've done? There was the question I had been waiting for. Sophie was finally ready to face the truth about her actions and their consequences. But it wasn't yet time to reveal my final card. First, I had to let her hit rock bottom completely. The next few days were crucial for my plan. Sophie decided to sell most of the jewels
keeping only the engagement ring Arthur had given me and a small necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. I watched her prepare to go to the jewelers, research prices, and negotiate with buyers. It was painful to watch her reduce decades of family history to commercial transactions, but it was necessary for her to understand the real weight of her decisions. "Mom, I got 180,000 pounds for the jewels," she told me one afternoon, counting the bills on the kitchen table. "It's less than I expected, but it's enough to pay off the most urgent debts." "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I have no choice. If I don't pay something soon, they'll foreclose on everything. Even this house could be at risk if they prove I have some kind of legal connection to the properties." How ironic the situation was. Sophie was worried about losing a house that I owned, paying the debts of a man who had abandoned her with money from jewels that had belonged to the same man who had created the fortune that could save her. "And how are you going to decide which debts to pay first?" "I talked to a free financial advisor at the bank. She told me to prioritize the debts that have real collateral because those are the ones that can affect property or lead to immediate foreclosure." Sophie had matured so much in these few weeks. The woman who had sold my belongings without consulting me was now carefully investigating every financial decision. The suffering had made her more responsible, but also more fragile. That night, while she was organizing the debt documents on the table, I received a call from Mr. Henderson. "Mrs. Vance, I have important news. We managed to locate Mark." "Where is he?" "In Paris, just as your daughter suspected. But here's the interesting part. He's trying to get French residency through a sham marriage with that young woman your daughter mentioned." "A sham marriage?" "Yes. Apparently, the girl needs papers, and he needs a way to stay in Europe without being deported. But the most important thing is that we found evidence that he deliberately falsified your daughter's documents with the intention of fleeing the country. That means Sophie can get out of the debts." "With this evidence, yes, we can prove fraud and coercion. Your daughter won't have to pay anything for what Mark did behind her back." It was perfect. I had a way to save Sophie from all her debts legally without her suspecting that I had the money to do it. "Mr. Henderson, I want you to start the legal process immediately. Don't tell my daughter anything yet. I want the process to be completely finished before I tell her. I don't want to give her false hope." "Understood. This will take about 3 weeks, maybe a month." "Perfect." When I hung up, Sophie looked at me with curiosity. "Who was that, Mum?" "A lady who was asking about Mrs. Davis, our neighbor on the corner. She had the wrong number." Lying had become easy. Every day that passed, I felt more comfortable with this double life I was leading. On one hand, I was the poor, abandoned mother Sophie believed me to be. On the other, I was a wealthy woman, silently orchestrating my daughter's salvation and education. Over the next few weeks, I watched Sophie struggle with decisions she never had to make, like how to stretch money for food, how to negotiate with creditors, how to look for a job when your credit history is ruined. It was a cruel but necessary education. "Mom, I went to 3 job interviews today," she told me one evening, coming home with swollen feet and a tired face. 2 of them told me they can't hire me because of the pending legal problems. The 3rd one offered me a part-time job cleaning offices at night. "Are you going to take it?" "I have no choice. It pays very little, but it's better than nothing. And I can work at night so I can keep looking for something better during the day. Seeing my daughter, who had lived a comfortable life for over 40 years, preparing to clean offices at night, broke my heart. But it also filled me with pride. She was finally facing reality without expecting someone else to solve her problems. Are you sure you can handle so much physical work? I'll have to learn. I can't keep being a burden to you, Mom. It's bad enough that you're letting me live here for free. This is your home, Sophie. No, Mom, this is your home, and I'm here because of your generosity, but I'm not going to take advantage of it forever. One night, while Sophie was on her first cleaning shift, Brenda came to visit. She sat in the kitchen with me, drinking tea and looking at the family photos on the walls. Eleanor, I have to ask you something. Did you know Sophie was going to come back in these conditions? What do you mean? Well, when she left, she seemed so sure of herself, so arrogant. She talked about the great life she was going to have in Bali, about how successful Mark was, and now she's back, completely broken, working a cleaning job, living with you again? Life takes many turns. Yes, but there's something else. I've been watching Sophie these days, and she looks different. Not just sad, but humble, as if she learned something important. Brenda had always been very perceptive. What do you think she learned? I think she learned the value of the things she had taken for granted, like having a mother who loves her unconditionally. Maybe. Eleanor, can I tell you something? When Sophie left and treated you so badly, many of us thought you would never forgive her. But here you are, taking care of her again, giving her
Home when she has nowhere to go. She's my daughter, Brenda. Yes, but not every mother would do what you're doing, especially after being treated the way you were treated. If Brenda only knew the complete truth, that I had the power to solve all of Sophie's problems, but was choosing to let her suffer a little longer so she would learn the full lesson. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? I think you're doing what a good mother would do, but I also think Sophie needs to fully understand what she lost when she abandoned you. What do you mean? I think she needs to value you not just as the mother who rescues her when she's in trouble, but as the strong woman who built a stable life for 45 years. She needs to respect you, not just need you. Brenda had hit the nail on the head. That was exactly the point of my entire plan. I didn't want Sophie to come back to me out of desperation. I wanted her to come back out of genuine respect and mature love. And how do you think that can happen? I think it's already happening. I've seen her these past few days, Eleanor. The way she talks to you now is completely different. She's no longer the daughter who gives you orders or treats you like a burden. Now she's a grown woman who is genuinely grateful to have a mother like you. That night, when Sophie returned from her job, I saw her arrive tired, but with a new dignity. She had earned those few pounds with her own effort, and that meant something to her. How was your first day? Hard, but not as bad as I thought. The other ladies who worked there helped me a lot. One of them, Mrs. Johnson, taught me tricks to clean more efficiently. Mrs. Johnson? Yes, she's 60 years old and has been cleaning offices for 20 years. She told me she started after her husband left her with 3 small children. She says it's not the job she dreamed of, but that it gave her independence and dignity. She sounds like a wise woman. She is. She said something that made me think a lot. She told me there are 2 types of people who end up doing this job. The ones who are there because they never had opportunities, and the ones who are there because they ruined the opportunities they did have. She asked me which group I was in. And what did you tell her? I told her the truth, that I had all the opportunities in the world.
a family that loved me, a stable home, an inheritance, and that I ruined it all by following a worthless man. What did she say? She laughed and said, "Well, darling, at least you know exactly why you're here. That puts you one step ahead of most people." Sophie poured herself a glass of water and sat with me at the table. "Mom, I want you to know something. These past few weeks have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important. Why? Because I finally understand what really matters. It's not money. It's not living in the most luxurious flat. It's not impressing people. It's having people who genuinely love you, who are there when everything falls apart." "Sophie, no." "Let me finish. You have every right to hate me for what I did to you. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I took everything Dad left you. I treated you as if you were a nuisance. And now I'm here expecting you to forgive me and take care of me." "I already forgave you, darling. But I haven't forgiven myself, and I won't until I prove that I've truly changed, that I've learned from my mistakes." Mr. Henderson called me the next morning. "Mrs. Vance, I have excellent news. The legal process is almost complete. We can get your daughter out of all of Mark's debts." It was time. After weeks of watching Sophie struggle, work, and reflect on her mistakes, the moment had finally arrived to show her that she had never been alone, that she had always had someone quietly watching over her. "Mr. Henderson, I want you to organize a meeting. It's time for my daughter to know the whole truth." Mr. Henderson arranged the meeting for Friday morning at his office. I told Sophie that I had made an appointment with a solicitor who could help her with her legal problems, but I didn't explain the details. She agreed to come, although she was nervous about the cost of the consultation. "Mom, I don't have money to pay a solicitor. I barely have enough to cover basic expenses." "Don't worry about that now, darling. Let's just hear what he has to say." We arrived at Mr. Henderson's office on time. Sophie had dressed in her best clothes, which now looked a little big on her thinner body. She was nervous, wringing her hands, expecting another piece of bad news on her endless list of problems. Mr. Henderson greeted us with his usual professional smile. "Mrs. Vance, Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing us. Although I should warn you that my financial situation is very complicated and I probably can't afford high fees." That's exactly what we're going to talk about. But first, I need you to review these documents. Mr. Henderson handed Sophie a thick folder. She opened it and began to read, her expression gradually changing from confusion to surprise. "I don't understand. These documents say that Mark forged my signature, that there is evidence of fraud, that I'm not responsible for the debts?" "That's right. We have been investigating your case for the past few weeks. We found enough evidence to prove that you were a victim of identity fraud." "But how is that possible? Who paid for this investigation? I don't have money for this." Mr. Henderson looked at me. It was my moment. "Sophie, there's something I need to tell you." "What, Mom?" I took a deep breath. After weeks of acting, I was finally going to reveal the truth. "Your father left me more than you knew." "Much more? What do you mean?" "Mr. Henderson, show her the other documents." Mr. Henderson took out a second folder and handed it to Sophie. This time, the documents were the property deeds, the bank statements, the investment certificates, the entire fortune Arthur had built in secret.
Sophie read in silence for several minutes. Her face went through a complete range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, comprehension. "Mom, this says you are the owner of the building where I lived." "Yes." "And that you have other properties, bank accounts, investments?" "Yes." "This means that when I sold the Cornwall cottage, it was your house and the sale was fraudulent?" "I already got it back." Sophie stared at the papers, trying to process the information. "How long have you known this?" "Since the day you called me from the doctor's office." "You knew all this when I came back from Bali asking for help?"
Yes. You knew you could solve all my problems when you saw me crying every night? Yes. There was a long, tense silence. Sophie closed the folders and looked directly into my eyes. Why, Mom? Why did you let me suffer when you could have helped me? This was the question I had been waiting for weeks. Because you needed to learn something you couldn't learn any other way. What? You needed to learn the value of the things you had lost, the value of family, of respect, of responsibility. When you abandoned me, it wasn't just money you took from me. It was dignity. It was love. It was trust. Sophie started to cry, but they weren't tears of self-pity like the ones she had shed during these weeks. They were tears of deep understanding. I abandoned you when you needed me most. Yes. I treated you like rubbish. Yes. And you saved me anyway. Yes, but not in the way you expected. I didn't save you by giving you money so you could keep making the same mistakes. I saved you by letting you hit rock bottom so you could learn to save yourself. Mr. Henderson discreetly intervened. Ms. Brooks, your mother has paid all the legal expenses to free you from Mark's debts. She has also recovered all the properties that were sold fraudulently. You are completely free of legal problems. And the cleaning job I got? You can quit if you want, I said, but I hope you don't. Why? Because that job is teaching you something you never learned when everything was easy. It's teaching you the value of your own effort, the dignity of honest work, the importance of valuing every pound you earn. Sophie wiped her tears and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the look of a daughter who needs her mother, but the look of a grown woman who respects another woman. Do you forgive me, Mom? I forgave you a long time ago, darling. The question is, can you forgive yourself? I don't know if I can. I did unforgivable things. People make mistakes, Sophie. The important thing is what we do after we recognize those mistakes. Mr. Henderson left us alone in his office for a few minutes. Sophie and I sat in silence, processing everything that had happened. Mom, I want you to know something. Even if you didn't have all this money, even if you were really the poor widow I thought you were, I would have learned the same lesson. What lesson? That there is nothing more valuable than having someone who loves you unconditionally. During these past few weeks, the only thing that kept me sane was knowing I had a home with you, that no matter how much I had ruined my life, you were still my mother. That will never change, Sophie. I know, but I also know that I can never take that love for granted again. I have to earn it every day with respect, with gratitude, with actions, not just words. We left Mr. Henderson's office with a completely new relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter, united by blood and habit. We were two grown women who had chosen each other after going through the most difficult test imaginable. The following weeks were about rebuilding, but not the kind Sophie expected. Even though she now knew I had enough resources to solve all her problems, she decided to keep her night cleaning job. Mom, I need to finish what I started, she told me one afternoon as she was getting ready for work. I can't just go back to a comfortable life as if nothing happened. Are you sure? You don't have to punish yourself forever. It's not a punishment. It's a way of remembering who I was and who I want to be now. I watched her put on her work uniform, something unthinkable a few months ago when she lived in the luxury flat with Mark. But there was something different in her posture, in the way she moved. She was no longer the broken woman that had arrived crying at my door. She was someone who had found dignity in honest work. Brenda came to visit me that afternoon, as she had done every few days since Sophie had returned. Eleanor, there are some very strange rumors going around the neighborhood. What kind of rumors? People are saying that you're not as poor as we all thought. Someone saw Sophie leaving a very elegant solicitor's office in the city, and then they saw her paying off all her debts at the bank. That costs a lot of money, Eleanor. People talk a lot, Brenda. Yes, but they're also saying you got your Cornwall cottage back and that somehow you managed to solve all of Sophie's legal problems. That costs a lot of money, Eleanor. Brenda knew me too well to fool her for long. What do you want to know exactly? I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from her. It was time to be honest with someone else. Arthur left me more than anyone knew. Much more. How much more? Enough so that Sophie and I never have to worry about money again. Brenda was silent for a moment, processing the information. And why did you pretend to be poor all these months? Because I needed Sophie to learn something she couldn't learn any other way.
What? I told her the whole story. Sophie's cruel phone call, my plan of silent reckoning, the weeks of watching her hit rock bottom, and finally the revelation in Mr. Henderson's office. Eleanor, that is brilliant and terrible at the same time. Terrible? Yes, because you let your own daughter suffer when you could have helped her immediately. But also brilliant because I understand why you did it. You do. Yes, Sophie needed to learn the value of the things she had lost. If you had simply given her money to solve her problems, she would have learned that there's always someone who will rescue her from the consequences of her bad decisions. Exactly. But Eleanor, didn't it hurt you to see her suffer? Every day, every night I saw her crying. Every morning I saw her get up to go to work tired and defeated. But I knew that if I rescued her too soon, she wouldn't have learned the full lesson. And do you think she learned it? Look for yourself. Sophie knows that she now has access to enough money to live comfortably, but she chose to keep her job. She knows she can move to a better place, but she decided to stay here with me. She knows she doesn't have to worry about the debts, but she's using her own savings to help other women in similar situations. She's helping other women? Yes, she became friends with the ladies she works with and is using some of the money she earned cleaning offices to help a colleague who is having trouble paying for her son's childcare. Brenda smiled. That's not the Sophie who went to Bali. No, she's not. This Sophie understands that money is a tool, not a goal. She understands that dignity comes from work and respect, not from material possessions. That night, when Sophie returned from work, I found me reading in the living room. Mom, I have to tell you something. Today, Mrs. Johnson asked me if I was the daughter of the rich lady from the north side of town. What did you tell her? I said yes, that you have enough money for me not to have to work. And do you know what she asked me next? What? She asked me why I was still working. So I explained that it was because I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And what did she say? She laughed and said, Honey, that's the difference between being rich and acting rich. Your mom taught you how to be truly rich. Mrs. Johnson is very wise. She is, and she made me understand something important. It's not about the money you have, but about how you use it and how you relate to it. Sophie sat down with me on the sofa. Mom, I want you to know that I've made a decision. I'm going to keep living here with you, but not as a daughter who has come back home to her parents. I want to stay here as a grown woman who chooses to share her life with her mother. What's the difference? The difference is that I'm going to pay my share of the expenses. I'm going to contribute to the upkeep of the house, and I'm going to treat this relationship as a partnership between 2 independent women who love and respect each other. Sophie, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Mom, I need our relationship to be different from what it was before. Before, I was a daughter who took my mother's love and care for granted. Now I want to be a grown woman who values and takes care of the most important relationship in my life. And your job? I'm going to keep working, but not necessarily cleaning offices forever. I want to go back to college. I want to prepare myself to do something more meaningful with my life, but I want to do it step by step, earning every opportunity. Do you have any idea what you want to study? Yes, I want to study social work. These past few weeks have taught me how many people are going through difficult situations without having anyone to support them. I want to use the resources we have to help other women who are going through what I went through. It was perfect. Sophie had not only learned to value what she had, but she had found a way to use her experience for something constructive. And what about Mark? Mr. Henderson told me he was arrested in France for the fraudulent marriage. He's going to be deported soon, but honestly, Mom, I don't care anymore. That part of my life is over. You don't feel any resentment? No, Mark did me a favor without even knowing it. If he hadn't abandoned and betrayed me, I never would have hit rock bottom, and if I had never hit rock bottom, I never would have learned to truly value what I have. That night, for the first time in months, I went to bed completely at peace. My plan had worked perfectly. Sophie had not only learned the lessons she needed to learn, but she had emerged from the experience as a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate person. Arthur would have been so proud. 6 months later, our life had found a new balance that neither of us could have imagined before. Sophie finished her social work studies with excellent grades, and I decided to use some of my resources to establish a foundation to help women in situations of domestic violence and financial abandonment. "Mom, the letter from the university arrived," Sophie said one morning, coming into the kitchen with an envelope in her hands. "I was accepted into the master's program. I start next semester. But Mom, I want you to know that I'm going to pay for it with my own savings. I've been saving money from my job at the council." The salary wasn't high, but she had learned to live with the essentials and to value every pound she earned. "Are you sure? We can easily afford the master's program." "I know, but I need to do it on my own. It's part of who I am now." Brenda came to visit that afternoon, as she had done every Friday for the past few months. She had become a confidant to both of us, watching our transformation with fascination. "Eleanor, I have to confess something," she said, pouring herself a second cup of tea. "At first, I thought you were very cruel to Sophie. And what do you think now?" "Now, I think you were the wisest mother I have ever known. Look at your daughter. Really, look at her." It was true. The Sophie that was in the living room studying for her exams was completely different from the one who had left for Bali months ago. This Sophie had a serenity that came from within, a confidence that was based on her own achievements, not on material possessions. Did you know I saw Sophie at the grocery store yesterday, buying vegetables for a family she's helping through her job? She hadn't told me, and when I asked her why she was using her own money instead of the government budget, she told me that some things can't be measured in official budgets. That night, Sophie and I had dinner on the porch, something that had become a tradition. It was our time to talk about the day, plan for the future, and simply enjoy each other's company. "Mom, I received a very strange letter today," she said, cutting her salad. "From whom?" "From Mark." My muscles tensed. "Mark? He wrote to you? From where?" "From prison in France. Apparently, he was sentenced to 2 years for marriage fraud. In the letter, he says he regrets everything he did and wants to ask for my forgiveness." "And how do you feel about it?" "Honestly, I don't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, no desire for revenge. It's as if that part of my life happened decades ago, not months ago." "Are you going to write back?" "No, not because I hate him, but because there's nothing to say. That Sophie who married him no longer exists. This Sophie has nothing to talk to him about." I was impressed by the maturity in her voice. The woman sitting across from me had developed an inner strength
that came from hitting rock bottom and getting up on her own. Do you know what this whole experience taught me, Mom? What? That true love isn't the one that tells you what you want to hear. True love is the one that teaches you what you need to learn, even when it hurts. It's a difficult lesson to learn, but it's a necessary one. Mark told me what I wanted to hear. He made me feel special. He convinced me that I deserved a life of luxury without effort. You taught me that true wealth comes from hard work, respect, and genuine relationships. That night, after Sophie went to her room to study, I sat on the porch alone, looking at the stars, and thinking about Arthur. I had promised him I would take care of our daughter, and I finally felt I had fulfilled that promise in the right way. I hadn't taken care of her by giving her money when she needed it. I had taken care of her by teaching her to take care of herself. I hadn't saved her by solving her problems. I had saved her by allowing her to learn to solve them on her own. The next day was Sunday, and we had planned to visit the Cornwall cottage together for the first time since I had gotten it back. Sophie hadn't wanted to go before, saying she needed time to process everything that had happened. "Are you ready?" I asked her as we got into the Mini. "I think so." The drive was silent but comfortable. When we arrived, Sophie stood for a moment in the driveway, looking at the cottage where we had spent so many family summers. "It looks exactly the same," she said finally. "Some things don't change, but others do. I am not the same person who sold this house." We went in together. The cottage was clean and tidy, exactly as Arthur and I had kept it for years. Sophie walked through each room, touching the furniture and looking at the family photos that hung on the walls. "Mom, I want to apologize." "You already apologized, darling." "No, I want to apologize specifically for this house. Not just for selling it, but for reducing all our family memories to a commercial transaction. It's forgiven. This house represents 40 years of family summers, of birthdays, of Christmases. Dad built that porch with his own hands. You planted that garden. I learned to swim at that beach. And I turned it all into money to fund the adventure of a worthless man." She sat on the sofa where Arthur used to read on Sunday mornings. "Do you know what this whole experience taught me, Mom?" "What?" "That true love isn't the one that tells you what you want to hear. True love is the one that teaches you what you need to learn, even when it hurts. It's a difficult lesson to learn, but it's a necessary one." Mark told me what I wanted to hear. He made me feel special. He convinced me that I deserved a life of luxury without effort. Sophie took a moment to find the app Desire from the phone and selected Full of Joy. "No, I want to apologize specifically for this house. Not just for selling it, but for reducing all our family memories to a commercial transaction. It's forgiven. This house represents 40 years of family summers, of birthdays, of Christmases. Dad built that porch with his own hands. You planted that garden. I learned to swim at that beach. And I turned it all into money to fund the adventure of a worthless man." She sat on the sofa where Arthur used to read on Sunday mornings. "Do you know what this whole experience taught me, Mom?" "What?" "That true love isn't the one that tells you what you want to hear. True love is the one that teaches you what you need to learn, even when it hurts. It's a difficult lesson to learn, but it's a necessary one. Mark told me what I wanted to hear. He made me feel special. He convinced me that I deserved a life of luxury without effort." We returned home that night with a new project and a completely renewed relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter united by obligation or need. We were two women who had consciously chosen to build a life together based on love, respect, and a common purpose. That night, before falling asleep, I spoke to Arthur in silence. We did it, my love. Our daughter finally understood what truly matters, and for the first time since his death, I felt he answered me. I always knew you would. You're both stronger than you think. Justice had arrived not as revenge, but as education, not as punishment, but as transformation. And in the end, we had both gained something much more valuable than money. We had gained an authentic relationship built on a solid foundation that no future crisis could destroy.